Talk about a shitty interface. Everybody and their mom would be like, this is the best sounding reverb that you can buy. But because it's free and it looks like shit, people like discount it. Okay, so we're gonna get into like my returns. Reverbs and delays. Like I said in some of my other videos, I'm a little bit of a dinosaur. Like I got used to things early on in my career that still kind of work and still like sound the way that I want them to sound. So I used to use Lexicon 480s and 960s in the hardware days, and I got used to them. I like the way they sound. I like this weird fader interface. This is just very familiar to me. And so when companies started making like these recreations of like a Lexicon 480 and they sounded really good and they looked like it, and for me it just works. I've got my various, not presets, but I've got like my various like starting points and algorithms that I really love in the 480. A couple of them that I use all the time. Brick Wall might be my favorite 480 algorithm for like drums or short rooms. I love Ricochet. It's a really cool, like almost like stadium sounding effect. Obviously everybody knows the A plate. I really love the fat plate as well. And some of these random halls, like the large random hall here, is something that I use a lot. Get a little unwieldy, but I like that one as well. Yeah, Relab, these guys make some awesome plugins. Another reverb that I really like, this isn't as popular, the Eventide SP 2016. There used to be a version of this. I think it was called like the Princeton Digital 2016. I love this for like short rooms. If I like recorded a guitar player in like a big studio, not like a arena or whatever, but like a recording studio, but a big room, and I set up like room mics on the other side of the room, and I want that sound, or I just want to put it in a space, this is one of my favorite reverbs for that. Don't want it to be like this big long thing. I just want to make it not feel dry, feel like it's in a space, but not really hear the reverb a lot. That's one of my favorites. This is become a new favorite, the Waves Magma Springs. I really like spring reverbs, but I find them so like hit and miss. Like I like the UAD AKG, I think it's like the BX20 or something like that. I like that, but then there's like spring reverbs that plugins that I don't like. And then some of them have options for tuning in the bass and the treble, and some of them don't. This is really great because it just gives you three flavors in here I really like. I really like the Motor City, I really like the 50s, and I really like the California. The other ones are like, yeah, they're okay, but like they're great. So it's like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7 spring reverbs in one. 3 of them I really like. And that's kind of spring reverbs for me. They're hit and miss. Okay, this is an interesting reverb that probably wasn't actually developed for a guy like me. I've heard of a lot of guys, like post guys, using this plugin, and I've heard of a lot of like guys who aren't doing like rock stuff. I don't know any like rock or like pop guys who are really using this, but this, if you dig into this and you really, like obviously it's got a lot of parameters, but if you really dig into this and make yourself some presets, this is one of like the most like realistic sounding reverbs I think I've come across in a good way. Like sometimes you don't want it to sound real. You want it to sound like a Lexicon 480. For reverbs that you want to hear, not like the ones that you're just like, I want it in a space, but I don't really want you to hear it. Like I want to hear the reverb, but I just want it to feel and sound real. This thing just sits in a track so easily. And I have a lot of problems with reverbs where I'm like, too loud, too quiet, too loud, too quiet. Like I'm always chasing that back and forth. This thing just like sits in the track, and it's like, I can hear the reverb, but it's not, doesn't feel too loud, but I can still hear the reverb. And I find that to be problematic with a lot of reverbs. So that's a cool one to check out. Here's a really, really expensive, really rare, really high end, if you can't sense the sarcasm in my voice, good old faithful Deaver. Talk about a shitty interface. If this thing looked like a piece of hardware, everybody and their mom would be like, this is the best sounding reverb that you can buy. But because it's free with Pro Tools and it looks like shit, people like discount it. The stock setting on this plugin has probably been on more tracks than any other stock setting on any other plugin. I guarantee it. The stock setting on this just like works. Here's what happens with me. I use this plugin when I'm tracking vocals because there's a DSP version that's low latency or very little and takes up very little power. Like the session runs really smooth with this plugin on it. And so I use this while I'm tracking. And then what ends up happening is like you get it sounding so good while you're tracking, like you start just tweaking things and adjusting things. But you can't take this off because then you start getting the latency and all that other shit. And then what ends up happening is you get to a point where like, cool, this is sounding good. And you're like, why change it? And then you look at like a final mix and you're like, oh man, the reverb on the vocal sounds awesome. What is that? And you're like, oh, it's the Hall Deverb Hall, large Hall. I love the non-lin setting on it as well. So don't discount that.